Hi everyone, and welcome to this special edition of Low Season Traveller Insider Guides. I'm your host, Jed Brown, founder of Low Season Traveller, and this episode was taken from the 8th session of the Keeping the Dream Alive series of webinars, which we're collaborating on with the World Tourism Association for Culture and Heritage and My Travel Research. This episode is entitled Crisis and Innovation and has been one of the most popular sessions we've ever had, largely due to the fact that our keynote speaker has such an incredibly rich experience to draw upon from her time in the travel industry. Tammy Marshall is the founder of the B Hive, a business transformation consultancy specialising in business strategy and transformation, innovation coaching and design thinking in the hospitality, leisure, lifestyle and tourism sectors. Alongside her work at the B Hive, Tammy has a strong connection with the startup community as a mentor to the startup programme at Sydney University, and she's also served as an advisor and mentor to several industry and university incubators and accelerators. With over 30 years of experience in the travel and tourism industry, Tammy has held an executive career with some of the biggest names in travel and tourism. Her past roles include Senior Vice President of Commercial for Carnival Corporation, Managing Director of Contiki Holidays, Global Managing Director of AAT Kings, Founder of Inspiring Journeys, Senior Vice President of P&amp Cruises, and COO at TFE Hotels. Tammy is an experienced non-executive director for the Youth Hostel International and Yankee Leisure Group, and she's also a member of the Lorette University Advisory Board. Tammy loves everything about the outdoors, the beach, hiking and yoga, and anytime she can, she's off exploring new and favourite destinations. This episode is the enlightening Q&A session which followed Tammy's brilliant keynote. Enjoy. Thank you very much indeed for that, Tammy. That was an incredible presentation. I'm furiously scribbling notes the whole time you're going through. So many themes within what you were talking about there. But there's quite a few things which struck a chord with me personally. The Secret Cinema, by the way, I've never done it myself in the UK, but my brother has. And actually, it's a pretty cool concept. But when my brother was describing it to me, I wasn't really sort of understanding it fully at first. But they went to see it was a Bond film or something, and everybody had to dress in the style of the James Bond sort of era and everything else. And he was just saying it was wildly popular. These things are massively popular in London, that whole Secret Cinema. It's not got to Australia or New Zealand yet?
No, it's only in the UK, but I think it's such a great example of an immersive experience.
Yeah.
And how can we as the travel industry start to adopt some of this thinking, even just in the booking pipeline, and not necessarily, we have an immersive experience when we go there, but how do we engage, pre and post that? And do some things differently, because it's certainly resonating and it's pushing up expectations, isn't it? For customers are going to want more. The more immersive experience they have, the higher the expectations will go.
Absolutely. And the other one which really resonated with me was the paradox of choice, whereby too much choice, it seems that the research seems to say that it confuses people. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that. It was a TED talk, you said, right?
Yeah, it's a TED talk. So I put the link in the deck as well for the TED talk. But often we think more is better, and we in the industry we keep rolling out more products and more complexity when it's actually not needed. And certainly in a time of crisis, we need to simplify. So it allows us to really, it lends itself to the innovation process beautifully, because we can just put out small amounts of product and test and learn and not have to put out a big shebang. So it allows us to be fast and start experimenting, and customers will respond to that.
And it's also a great opportunity again and it's something that you sort of touched on later on, that right now there is an opportunity for startups for sure. But for startups that sort of feel, myself, our organization is a startup, and you have that sort of feeling of, we need to have as much product as, Expedia or any of these kind of guys. And actually when I was looking at that part of your presentation, I was thinking, okay, this actually is pretty cool, because, I can't possibly compete in terms of breadth. As a startup, I can't compete with those kind of guys. But actually, from what you're saying, it's not really necessary to provide that much choice, because actually it can paralyze the decision making of consumers.
And if you look at startups, they're very specialized and very narrow in terms of what they offer, and they've been very successful in that. Whereas as organisations, we've grown and added more breadth, as you say, more categories, more breadth, more complexity. But that doesn't necessarily materialise into as much revenue as you'd potentially like.
Yeah. It's gas actually, because my wife always takes the mickey out of me, because when I'm in the supermarket, and the cereal aisle in our supermarket, it's just vast. There's just so much choice of cereals. And she said that I'm the only person that she's ever met that can spend a full 20 minutes in the cereal aisle just trying to decide what to buy. And it's an absolute time killer, but it's probably a mini example of that.
Exactly.
It's crazy. One of the other themes as well that I'm really getting actually in a big way is this is the whole theme of nostalgia being really big business. And as you were sort of going through that, and in particular on the music side, because music actually as well brings you back to a moment in your life, or a moment, it's that escapism. It brings you to another place. And it was just there's a program that we have in the UK, which actually we're just watching at the moment with my daughters as well, which is called Car Share. And actually, as a program, it ticks off a lot of what you were talking about. The whole program is filmed actually in a car, and it's a guy called Peter Kay. He's a comedian in the UK, and it's basically just conversations between him and the person with him. But the radio in the car is playing old 80s hits. And that's a huge part of why I love the program. Yes, there's the dialogue, which is wonderfully constructed, and it's very simple and it's very easy viewing. But you're listening to these 80 hits, and it brings you back to a time in your life, well, when you were younger and freer and arguably happier. And I just think that's a hugely powerful thing, nostalgia, isn't it?
It is, and it's and I think if we all reflect on it, just like you have, we actually probably have gravitated to listening and enjoying some of the older music. And even on Facebook at the moment, there's a whole photo share thing where people are going back and showing their life, and over 10 days, and it's gone crazy, right? It's the same thing, going back, and I'm looking at a time that I was happy and proud, and I'm sharing those moments. So nostalgia is pretty powerful in terms of, even in the kind of our local recoveries, as we think about tourism, how can we tap into nostalgia in the early stages of rebound, because people are coming out of isolation, and if you tap into that emotion, even if it's just in your communications, or if it's value add, that you get a Monopoly game and Monopoly board for every family purchase, or whatever it is that takes you back. It's a bit of fun, but you're tapping into that emotion that people are really resonating with.
Yeah, I love it. Another aspect with the nostalgia is the I don't know if it's the same down under, but certainly in the UK, there's just been a resurgence of people doing jigsaws, which is something that I did as a kid. Haven't done jigsaws forever. Everything's been taken over by tablets and electronic games, etc. But there's been, during the lockdown, a huge resurgence in jigsaws. So much so that we're going through these 1,000-piece jigsaws with the kids. And they're obsessed about it. They love it. They do nothing else but just sit down doing these jigsaws. But then when it comes to buying them on Amazon or whatever, they're sold out. They're absolutely sold out. And again, another sort of, I suppose it's an opportunity there, is create your own branded jigsaw, or some kind of a cool jigsaw. I tell you, they'll shift like hotcakes at the moment here. Is it the same kind of trend you got down there with this kind of things?
Yes, I mean, I've heard jigsaws are also very popular at the moment. I think you're a living example of all the mega trends that I was talking about. You're giving me examples of how you are actually living those.
Yeah, more by accident than by design. But like you're saying, it's the environment that we're in right now, which is making this more of a necessity, I guess. We'd never thought of doing jigsaws in ages. The kids wanted to play their electronic games and everything else, but it's just it's surreal. I mean, I suppose on that, one of my next questions then for you is, we're in this unique time right now, whereby businesses are having to be brave, taking risks, being entrepreneurial. How can we keep that momentum going forward as we exit this crisis? How can we keep that spirit moving forward?
Yes, and that's a really good question, because out of necessity, necessity is the mother of reinvention. So we kind of become very creative when we need to be. But, you know, once we've kind of ticked the box and we know we're safe and we've survived this situation, and business is getting back to normal, and we say, phew, this is all okay, our natural inclination is to go back to being risk averse.
Yep.
So I think the challenge for businesses is to actually think about adopting the human-centered approach that I talked about, or the design-led approach, because if you trust that process, then you're constantly checking in on customers and what they need, and you're evolving and you're testing, and you're actually allowing maybe the company to have an investment fund. Some people call it a gambling fund, some call it R&D from the old days, but to have a fund that you actually spend on innovation and that you spend on rapidly testing ideas. And I think this is a good reason why we shouldn't lose that momentum. So if you adopt this process, then how do you keep it going? How do you actually put a fund aside to actually keep doing that? How do you even allow your teams to, like 3M, to actually have some time to help ideate and contribute to new ideas and be part of that design-led process? Because innovation comes from everywhere and anyone. It's not a top-led approach. It really is more a bottom-up approach. So I think it's all about embracing a process for the future and embedding that in your business, because otherwise we're going to default back to being risk averse.
Yeah.
Because survived it, everything's okay now, and that's not what we want. We want to keep the creativity going.
Yep. And then with regards to the 7 deadly sins, I loved that. How are you helping your clients through those at the moment?
Yeah, so I always think a lot of the innovation companies I also work with say they won't always work with clients because they're not ready for innovation. And so kind of the step before innovation is making sure that the organization is ready. And to me, I've had great success in using the sins. It's almost like a truth-telling tool, because people become honest. And I think, you know, we kind of frame it around, we're all corporate sinners and we all do this. So let's have the conversation about how we address those, and then let's build a blueprint around how we're going to overcome those barriers and turn it upside down. And I think most of the time organizations don't have that conversation. They don't have the conversation. They don't think about all the red tape they've put in place that's holding them back. They're not truly customer centric. Getting survey and data of customers is not being customer centric. So it's a whole mindset shift. And we use the sins kind of it's a bit of a gamified and fun, but it actually needs to be, because it's actually quite heavy in terms of what has to come up and what we have to get out to be able to move those blockers and remove those barriers to be able to move forward and really start an innovation process. So I've found it very effective, and it's kind of a step before you start the innovation process.
Yeah. Love that. Okay, we're getting some questions through, so let me have a look. From Sean M. Everyone is pivoting towards digital, but is it a thought-out process on innovation and the possible revenue stream for the organization, or just the fact that today is the only way to be relevant is to be digital?
Yeah, I think if I hear you clearly, we're going digital because we have no choice right now.
Yeah.
But I think out of this, these digital learnings and this digital capability that organizations are getting, I think that this is something we can embed into the process into the future. So we may still take people on holidays and not just do it virtually anymore, but we may actually start sharing the virtual experience to help drive the booking funnel. So
Yeah.
why not have an immersive digital experience that helps actually drive higher conversion and higher transparency around the type of experience they're going to have. So I actually think what we'll see is a lot of creativity come in our whole booking process, or engaging with our customers pre-post, whatever it may be, by using virtual and immersive technologies. And maybe it will become a new revenue stream that I can't afford to go on holidays this year, but I can take a virtual experience because I can't get away right now. But maybe it is definitely operators are looking at it's an alternative, potentially an alternative revenue stream. It's a lot cheaper than going on holidays itself, but it's potential to do that. So I think the learnings we're getting from digital will definitely become will be a step change in how we actually sell travel in the future, is my belief.
I think on the on the video side of this as well, I was thinking recently, for any of those organizations that have invested very heavily in video content, this immersive content that brings people in to really experience the destination. And even if they've only just started to invest in that as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, that's for sure going to be useful going forward, like you say, because it is great at inspiring people. And I think that through necessity, I guess we've had to learn how to better inspire people to want to travel, so that there is the demand and the will when we come out of this. But that won't be wasted, will it? I mean, they're only going to be able to use that even more going forward.
No, and I think it's also shown a real shortfall in our digital capability, particularly in our country. In the retail space, it's certainly because you can't go shopping. The actual retail experience online has been pretty poor for most companies. So, the speed at which they need to improve how they transact and how they inspire is certainly a huge focus right now. And that learning is going to be very beneficial in the future. And I think it means everyone's going to have to up their game in terms of the digital experience. And I think having a very strong digital component will be very important for anyone in the travel business going forward. And it always has, but I actually think it's another level again.
Yeah, I agree. Question here from Matthew McNeil. Good afternoon, Matthew. Do you think that nostalgia will see a desire for the old school way of travel, such as long road trips and hitchhiking and the big adventures of roughing it?
I don't know about hitchhiking, but I do think that, yes, I think the old adventures of getting in the car and doing road trips, sitting around the campfires and roasting marshmallows, I think that there is some experiences, those shared experiences with friends and family, very simple, being out in nature. RVs in this country and caravans, push bikes have all gone through the roof in terms of sales. So people are definitely looking to go out and have that type of experience. And I think it's taking us back to a simpler time. And I think in some ways we've all craved that, because life's got so manic and so fast. It's allowed us to slow down a little bit. So I think actually thinking about those types of experiences we want. I think the roughing it too, I think to your point on the question, I think the roughing it could also be something we really aspire to as well. I don't need this huge luxury. Just let me go and have a real experience.
Yeah, authenticity, it's that word again. Next question, Sean M. again. In my personal experience in advocating innovation internally or to a client, the biggest challenge is the people barrier, the mindset. How can that be overcome?
Yeah, and this is
probably a common problem, I would have thought, actually.
Yeah, so the one thing that this does says right now is there's a necessity to have to innovate and have to change. So by nature of the burning platform, it's probably taking away some of those barriers that were there before. But I think there's quite a few things that need to be looked at. So first of all, the senior executive team and CEO need to really embrace innovation. And I think first and foremost, innovation is a process. It's not something magical that just pops up and there's a new idea and you launch something that's super successful. It's actually quite a rigorous process. And so you need to put the process in place. You need to break down the silos. You need to allow the organization, everyone across the organization, the ability to contribute to the innovation process, because it shouldn't be just a chief innovation officer sitting in an office running innovation. It is a collective movement in the organization. So I think it's what we try to address with our barriers for the SINs. is we have playing cards and canvases and all kinds of tools that actually help us to unlock and have those conversations, because first and foremost, innovation happens through conversation. You need to break down, and in order to break down the barriers, you've first got to talk about it. And a lot of these things don't get talked about. So mindset starts with all these conversations, understanding the why we need to change and understanding what's getting in the way. So I think it requires some time. There needs to be real intention from the senior executive team to want to support this movement. And then I think you need to, get rid of red tape, get rid of silos, like those sort of things. Don't do anyone any good. So, and we're seeing a real movement for organisations to move to more networks of teams as opposed to hierarchies. So, and that also leads to more agile organisations that can drive innovation. So there's quite a lot of things that need to move, but if an organisation wants to and is willing to, then it's very possible.
I guess quite a lot of that hangs on the senior management team, and I guess the chief exec as well. It has to start at the top, right, and go all the way through.
And the senior management team have to get out of the way too, get out of the way and empower people to come up with ideas and present ideas and have a process for that to happen. Have an opportunity where ideas are born and they're tested, but also how you commercialize it.
Yeah, it was interesting actually. One of the companies I worked at before, we had every year, so part of there's a recognition to that we needed to innovate, and the senior management team came up with a concept where there was 1 week of the year, I think it was in December when business was kind of quiet, and that was the innovation week. And I just remember thinking, that's it. The rest of the year, by the way, nothing. But that 1 week, that was when we could be innovative, and it felt a bit weird. I got the intention of it, but I thought this is a bit strange. But I think I guess that's part of the problem, is maybe a lot of organizations tend to think of it as not quite a box ticking exercise, but it's almost like, we know we've got to be innovative. So, let's put on the innovation week, in that quiet week just before Christmas, and then we've done the innovation for the year, which is just surreal, isn't it, really?
Yeah, and I think you have to start with, what does innovation mean to you? What does it mean to your organization? And you have to define the language. And we always start there because everyone has a different definition of innovation. And of course, there are different types of innovation. There's different types, but there's also breakthrough innovation, or there's kind of maintenance innovation or incremental. But we have to understand, what level of innovation do we want? What are the specific areas of innovation? Is it the business model? Is it products? Is it, try and identify some of those areas of where innovation is important to the organization, and that helps provide a bit of a vision and a guide. And then obviously break down the barriers and actually put in a process and metrics and incentives and etc. So it is. That's why I'm saying it's kind of a different way of thinking to the way our organizations were traditionally built. And I think and as you said, you don't do it for 1 week. It's iterative, it's continuing to do it, right? So, and you might run design sprints, once a month, where you accelerate some of the innovation thinking, but it's constantly being tested and experimented on and getting feedback from customers and so forth. And I ran a design sprint with Intrepid, which finished earlier this year in January, and we had customers in the green room while the teams were, we'd already done the research and the insights, and then they were prototyping and building visual prototypes. They're bringing customers, test it, iterate from that, and as a result of that, they changed how they talk to customers, what channels they talk to them on. I mean, they made a significant shift in the whole way, because that was our whole design sprint was, I guess, around communications and brand, but they changed and flipped everything they were doing. But having those deeper conversations with customers and getting to experiment with customers at the same time that you're running a design sprint, so you can do those and kind of lock those in to accelerate periods of innovation. But overall, we should always have a process where people can ideate and contribute throughout the organisation.
Absolutely. I'd like at this point to bring in Carolyn. Are you there, Carolyn?
I am indeed here.
There you go. Sorry, I'm springing that up on you. I hope you're not in the middle of your brew.
No. I was listening attentively.
No. Any more questions? I haven't had a chance just to have a quick look.
Yeah, there's lots and lots of questions, Jed. I think some of them we've touched on a little bit. One that I particularly like from Nigel, who was talking about the issue. You said, Tammy, that that trust and that safety, so much at the fundamentals of this. But obviously, we're going through a process where we're having to make short-term versus long-term trade-offs on trust in travel, around the whole cancellations, refunds, all of those issues. How do we rebuild trust after that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great example of a hotel that's actually approached this in a very transparent way. So they've said, we'd love you to book. We're still going to be around, but for whatever happens in terms of travel restriction, if you can't go, we'll refund your monies, but less a 10% deposit. But if you decide to come back, we'll give you the 10% back. So what they've done is actually made it so flexible and so easy for the customer to do business with them. But that's bookings for today, what you're talking about. And I think that's the future. How do you make right now the bookings a much more flexible and transparent process? That's going to build trust. And I think right now customers are going to expect that in the future. But if you roll back to the fact that we've had lots of bookings that transpired during this period where people haven't got refunds, because the travel industry was never good at reverse engineering refunds, because we send out to all the different suppliers around the world, and it's very hard to get that back. And obviously most people have got a travel credit and so forth. But I think the future will be, in the short term, we're going to have to build trust by actually providing much more flexible conditions in our terms and conditions. They're going to have to be not in fine print anymore, more conversational and certainly more transparent about what you'll do for them and how flexible you'll be, because we're going to have to be flexible over the next couple of years. Things could ebb and flow in terms of the pandemic, and it's going to require us. It's frustrating in terms of trying to drive revenue and maybe shorter booking patterns, but we don't have a choice but to do that in terms of building trust. And the example I gave you, I mean, I can't remember everything that I read, but I just thought the tone and the language of it, the conversation they had around the transparency of the fact, don't worry, we're still going to be here, so we're not going to go bankrupt, so don't worry about your money, but we're happy to offer you full refund less the admin cost, but we'll give that back to you if you rebook. And it was a really nice way of dealing with it all. And then they went on to talk about all the safety protocols and etc. But I hope that answers your question, Carolyn, but I do think rebuilding trust is about flexibility in the future and transparency.
I absolutely agree on the transparency, Tammy. I remember, I mean, this is something that we saw long before this crisis. When we were talking to people about what would encourage them to do certain kinds of travel to customers, we've heard a lot. Even sort of 7 or 8 years ago, we were hearing people say things like, I hate the asterisk. And indeed, we saw one of the major banks in Australia actually around that time clearly have been hearing the same thing, because they actually ran an ad campaign that said, no asterisks. So, and I think it's another side of that thing you were talking about with choice, which is if we overload people's brains, not only are we kind of undermining trust, but we're actually making our lives difficult, because I think the courts now are not doing that. Now, Catherine has asked if we can put up the emerging themes again. So I'm just going to do that while we're talking, to click back through to some of the emerging themes that we have.
The diamond picture, that's probably the best.
Okay,
the pyramid.
so Catherine had asked to just briefly show the emerging themes again, because I know you were trying to keep things tight. So I did just wonder if you wanted to, anything that you wanted to deep dive on that, and then I'll go back to the diamond.
Well, I think the emerging themes are, I said, how can I escape to a better place? This whole wellness theme, exploration, and I think that to that question before about roughing it and getting out into the wild, I think there's a whole movement back to nature. Creating memories has always been a big part of the travel industry, and that also leads to the nostalgic piece. I think this whole real movement, so people want to see, you know, even on the whole TikTok movement, people wanted to see real experiences, what people are really doing. It's no longer finessed, it's just how it is and what happens. Shared experiences, I think everyone's longing for more of that connectivity that we've missed during isolation. And brands need to be far more supportive of their customers in the future. So, you know, a good example of that is Lululemon, the yoga brand. They go so far as not just selling merchandise, but they actually want to help their customers really grow personally, kind of on a personal development journey. And they've provided, you know, lots of things around meditation and yoga tips. They've kind of provided so much to really support their customers and actually try and do the best by them and bring out, and it's kind of more than just being supportive. They're trying to actually help them on their journey. So brands are starting to go beyond just, here's what I do, how can I actually help you also transform? And that's one of the brands that's doing that really well. And I think community engagement, we've seen a real movement to finding our tribes, especially in isolation. So what are the tribes that have similar causes or similar interests to me that I can connect with? And so that whole community engagement's been huge. And I actually think that will continue to grow and be important.
Great, thanks for that, because as I say, I could see Catherine was calling out for that. Now, Tammy, did you want me to flick on to the diamond at this point as well?
Oh, she was looking at, sorry. Yep.
No, oh, gone too quick. There we go.
No, I mean the pyramid, sorry. The pyramid with the friends. I thought that's the one she was originally talking to.
Okay, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think there was a degree of, but when I saw the actual title, I realized that one might have been there, but it might be now we're actually flipped to that on the screen, whether there's anything you wanted to add about any of that, because I think we saw the trust question come up.
Yeah, I think, look, I think that this is, I've probably summed up in terms of the importance and relevance of these, and I just think it's a matter of how do you use these to integrate into your communications, your brands, or your products. And I think these just becomes part of the innovation lens. So you still need to think about, they provide inspiration and part of the process to then, and you combine that with customer insights to think about how you can actually make them relevant.
Cool. Question from Mark. You touched on this, which is understanding a little bit, but I think could be worth deep diving a bit further, Tammy, which is what innovation means. So while companies think of innovating, do they stay within their sphere of business, or do they innovate into a business that's radically different from what they're undertaking today? Like your example of Samsung. I always remember that initially Nokia used to make wellies, Wellington boots and gum boots. So
yeah, I love that example.
Yeah, I think it's a strategic question as well. So what business are we in? If we've got assets, how can we redeploy them in different ways? What capabilities do we have that we could use in different ways? So if we're seeing our market contracting and potentially we're not going to have the same kind of growth trajectory, then that's when we can start looking at breakthrough innovation and looking at adjacent industries and actually thinking about how we could redeploy ourselves in a very different way. And often it's in our mission statement. Our mission statement enables us to think beyond a sector. So sometimes the purpose or mission will be about, you know, helping people be better people, for instance, and that says I don't have to do that through travel. So it allows you to step into other sectors and think about your capability and your experience and what business models would work. So I think there's an opportunity right now to think about breakthrough innovation and how do you take some of that capability and resources and think completely different. And they say the 70-20-10 horizon, so 70% of our time is spent kind of on that core business, 20% on that adjacent, what sort of other innovations can we bring in, and 10% is that disruptive or breakthrough innovation. So we kind of have to keep our eye on all three horizons. So we're always innovating in the core, always looking at kind of the adjacent piece, and we should also be challenging ourselves to think about breakthrough innovation, and that means taking it to a completely different sector as possible.
Okay, great answer. Jed, were there any other questions that kind of really stood out?
Question kind of linked to that from Wendy Triplet. Good afternoon, Wendy. How do you engage small operators to commit to training, innovation, and change?
Well, I think for small operators, it's there's less bureaucracy. So hopefully it should be a lot easier, because innovation works very well in small teams. So I think it's a matter of bringing in the process and trusting in the process, and training your team up to give them the capability around innovation and giving them the understanding. But small teams and small business is perfect. It's actually easier than giant corporates, because they're kind of like the tanker, which is really hard to turn the ship. The small business has the ability to be nimble and fast. And that's why they say today, your competition can come from anywhere, because technology enables all of us to it's very accessible for us to be able to be innovative and competitive. It's no longer the same game that it was. So I think as a small business, you have more opportunity to move the ship faster and to embrace the innovation process.
Yeah. Another question, well, it's sort of more of a comment to get your thoughts on, actually, but it's quite an interesting one. This is from Jason Hill. Good afternoon, Jason. I have a different view of silos. A good silo park has strategically connected pipes used to transfer content from one silo to another, whilst keeping silos specialized and focused on what they do best. Aren't well-connected silos the ultimate solution? We need to keep focused and specialized, as this creates value and productivity, doesn't it? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that definitely that's a step up from having a silo that's collaborative. So the silo is collaborative with other silos. But what it does say is that you're still running a waterfall approach, which is a linear approach. So you've still got to go from one silo to the other to progress something. What we're talking about in innovation is actually not having to move from one silo to the other. It's actually having a connected group of people working on a team that are actually driving that innovation process. So networks of teams do not have to jump through hoops, do not have to approach one silo at a time. They're already working together. That's kind of the more agile approach, as opposed to, I know what you're saying, and I do think what you're saying is a great improvement in having the pipes and having good relationships and a bridge to all of those silos. That certainly is a big advantage on just having a silo mentality organization. But I do think the breakthrough is actually just having teams with different functionalities and skill sets and capabilities working together, regardless of what function, what level of the organization they're in. They all bring something different to the team and to the problem they're trying to solve.
Would you carry that into every day, though, Tammy? I wonder if that's what Jason's kind of getting at, is in the day-to-day creation. Once you've got the innovation running in the day-to-day doing of it, does that still apply?
Well, I still think that having people work representing different functions is a faster, more agile way to move.
I agree. Yeah, we've been talking a lot in the series so far about ideas like cognitive diversity and bringing lots of different thinking in to that. Now, Tammy, we talked a little bit about, quite a lot about the innovation, the sins of innovation that's starting in the cultural. But one of the things that has also been a common theme in the series, which Nguyen from Singapore has touched on, which is the very first step. What's the very first step to start on in an innovation journey? How do you start that process of changing the culture?
Yeah, I think that it's clearly signalling to the organisation that you want to start tapping into a more innovative approach, and that you want to go on this journey. So getting the buy-in from the organisation in the first place. So setting the why and the intention, and often right now it's out of necessity. And so I think people are buying in much faster and putting up less resistance because they understand the need. So now's a good time to actually have that conversation. So once you've got willingness from all your players, or you know who your potential resistors are, then you can manage that. And then, as I said, the first step to me is to get rid of what are the barriers getting in the way of innovation. And then helping your team learn, design thinking, understanding the design thinking model. And then it is usually better to have an external, fresh facilitator co-creating and working with you through the innovation process. It is very organizational. The organisation actively gets involved in talking to customers and very much a part of the process, but it's good to have it facilitated. But I think it comes down to setting the intention, providing some skills and capability around understanding the design process, and then start the process, which I mentioned before. Get rid of what are the barriers? Let's talk about it. Let's get rid of those barriers. Keep going back up, other way.
Okay. Oh, I was just clipping to the end while you were talking, Tammy, but where would you like me to clip to?
Just go down again.
Oh, to the Cinnovators.
There, that one. No, up one.
Up one.
Go back to the 5 steps. That's kind of the human-centered design. So once you've broken down the barriers, the design process is all about getting inspiration, understanding what are the green shoots, what's emerging, then getting underneath what customers, what are some of the customer insights, what are your customers saying, and even today, maybe some of your customers will change from who they are right now, because when we know people are in different boats right now. Some are hugely stressed and under pressure working at the moment. Others are very worried about the financial situation, and others might be cruising, but we're all in a different situation. So some of your customers today may not be your customers in the future. So it's probably starting with a blank sheet on making sure you understand who they are, but actually starting to have that closer look at what's changing and talking to customers starts the process. And those insights and these themes really start to feed into a design process where you're also trying to get breakthrough ideas from other adjacent sectors as well. So you are trying to inspire to get beyond just incremental innovation. But that's kind of the steps. This is the human-centered design approach. This is how it starts. It starts with all the insights and then feeds through the double diamond process. But I think the very first step, to answer your question, is definitely to start with the willingness and the intention, and the need for change.
So there you have it. Huge thanks again to Tammy Marshall for sharing her insights on innovation with us this week. And if you haven't already done so, I do have a listen to the brilliant keynote from this session in the previous episode, which is also out now. That's all for now. Enjoy your day, stay safe, stay healthy, stay home, and don't forget that our content will always be free for everyone, as we believe that travel is better without the crowds.